Hi, I'm Carl Dobrowolski. I'm with Missions Together. We just concluded our Missions Together gathering on November the 2nd here in the Raleigh-Durham area. And Andrew Steyer, who you see on your screen of Always Going, was one of our breakout speakers. And today we have a special session where we're going to discuss three barriers to everyday evangelism. Andrew, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed the event and looking forward to talking today.
Thank you, Andrew. Now, Andrew, we all know as believers that we should be going. We want to be obedient to the call. This is not just some person that issued a call to go to all of the world, even our Jerusalem, even to our next door neighbor, loving our next door neighbor. However, many of us, despite the fact that we want to be obedient, Andrew, we're intimidated. We succumb to fears, to real or maybe not real or imaginary barriers to everyday evangelism. Let's talk about this. Three barriers to everyday evangelism that in your experience you've found people struggle with. Can you discuss can you discuss them with us? In fact, the first one is and I think a lot of those that are viewing you, hearing you, experience, they tried it. It didn't go well. How do we get around that, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. Evangelism is something that is scary to a lot of people, and in large part for this first reason that they tried it once, or something like it, or what they thought it was, as maybe a response to a sermon, or just out of sheer ambition, a desire to join God's mission and tell somebody about Jesus. They tried it, and it didn't go well. It didn't go exactly. And oftentimes it's not that it went horribly. It's just that either they didn't seal the deal, right? Somebody didn't repent and believe right there. Um, or it was awkward and they didn't know what to do, or the conversation didn't go as they imagined it, and so they left. I say they we, because I've done this a time or two as well with friends early on, where I left feeling like, I don't know if I did that right. Maybe I'm not so cut out for this. And what happens when that happens, when we don't have a strong planting, watering, harvesting sort of theology, understanding the long process of redemption, we can begin to think, I think I did it wrong. Maybe I'm not so cut out for this. I shouldn't be doing this. I'll just leave it up to other people. Maybe the pastor can do it. So I'll just invite someone to church and the pastor can share the gospel with them. Or this is something for missionaries, but not me. I clearly am not good at this. And after an attempt or two, it can get really easy to shut down and really never engage it ever again. I like to say that when I was a teenager, I had my best friend. Well, I didn't share the gospel. I tried to start a spiritual conversation 2 times. I got shut down both times. It wasn't mean, it was just awkward. And for the next 10 years, I didn't talk to him about Jesus. It shut me down for an entire decade. I'm only 33. That's a third of my life. That it just shut me down. And I didn't want to engage in it anymore because of that icky feeling, that, again, wasn't hostile. It was just not what I wanted it to be.
So, so I suppose we're 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 uh, we're making the perfect the enemy of the good.
Mhm.
We try to take a few steps forward. It's not perfect, and we collapse, and then we end up doing as you did with your friend for 10 years.
Yeah, in reality, it's just an immaturity of theology, right? Like when I was younger, I thought it was me that was changing hearts. And I got to that conclusion because someone told me to go in the Great Commission, go and make disciples. I was like, okay, I better make disciples. So if I left that conversation and that person wasn't a disciple, my brain, because of, I was in school at the time. It's about grades and tests and accomplishments. So I transferred that to my theology, and I had an immature theology where I was the hero and not God. Also, I would try to garner these results and then present them to God to
Hmm.
earn his love or approval. And that's just bad theology. So I think a lot of folks are walking around with just an immature theology, and it's nothing against them. Everything else in our world is kind of accomplishment driven. But this one, we prioritize faithfulness over accomplishment. I like to say faithful conversations over immediate conversions. That
Hmm.
little shift where God says, I'm just asking you to play a part.
Hmm.
I can walk away from any conversation going, well, I did it. I did what I was asked. I was never asked to change their heart. I was asked to share the love of Christ. And just that little change transforms everything.
And we need to celebrate those moments
Oh,
as
yeah.
opposed to walking away with our tails down and our heads bent over. Um, there's also a fear of the worst case scenario, and the devil is so clever. Fake us out at every end. It's going to go terrible. I'm going to be a laughing stock, or whatever we conjure up. Isn't that another barrier, Andrew?
Absolutely. That's a huge one. I tell people all the time, this has not been my experience when talking to people about faith and about Jesus. But in my mind, I tell myself it's going to go horribly. And because maybe because of what I've seen on the internet or because of the enemy whispering to me, they're going to physically harm you. They are going to shout at you. They're going to make you feel small. And so it's a defense mechanism. I'll just stay quiet because I want to protect myself, security and comfort. And those are two dangerous ideas, specifically when it comes to our faith. I like to point
Mm,
to even in those worst case scenarios, because I'm not saying that they won't happen, but when they do, we can look at the example of Christ because he, one, promised us persecution. This is when the world hates you. It's not that they hate you, they hate me, right? Two, Matthew chapter 5, blessed are you when they persecute you. They treated the prophets in the very same way, right? They killed Jesus. When we're treated like him, and that is the worst case scenario, when we're treated like him, we can actually rejoice because they see Christ in us. But like I said, this has not been my experience. People are willing to talk about spiritual things. We often don't give them the opportunity because of this fear. We quit the conversation before it ever starts. And in doing that, to protect ourselves and to maintain comfort and security, we rob people of hope and joy and peace. And
and,
that's something to wrestle with.
and Andrew, just for the record, you were never stoned.
Not
You were
yet.
never pummeled by a mob. You
Right.
were never thrown in jail, and you were never hung, right?
No.
So it's apparent. And in
Yeah.
fact, you've had probably more positive conversations than you had negative conversations.
Yeah, it's amazing when I strike up a spiritual conversation, whether someone is genuine or not. What I've noticed is that 99 out of 100 times, because of the relationship I've developed with that person, they respect the conversation and they respect me, even if they disagree. I've had great
Mm.
conversations with people I disagree with because we have a natural love for one another. We can actually come from two different places, and I think I'm right. I have the truth of the gospel, and they think, well, I think I'm right. I just did a video about this on our social media. I said, when you feel a conversation turning sour, because that's a great fear that people have. And it's real. Conversations can get a little awkward. I said, one of the best things you can say is, you just stop. You know, I love you, right? And their answer to that question is going to determine a lot. Well, no, I don't feel like you
Mm,
love me right now. Okay, well, then let me stop talking about this and just double down on the fact that I do love you. Or if they say, yes, I know that you love me, you can say, okay, so I'm not saying this to make you feel small. I'm not saying this because I think you're evil. I'm saying this because I love you. That just pausing and just saying, you know, I love you, right? It can change the entire tenor of a conversation that is coming from two different places.
I love it, Andrew. By the way, we are with Andrew Steyer. He heads up Always Going, an organization dedicated to everyday, joyful, overflowing evangelism. And at the end of our conversation, Andrew is going to tell us how to get in contact with him and how to buy his book, Always Going. Before we go to the last barrier, give us a pro tip to start a spiritual conversation, even though we might have butterflies in our stomach and Satan whispering in our ear, that's going to be a disaster. Give us a pro tip on how to take that step forward, build a bridge by that first sentence or two. Give us a tip right here.
Yeah. The well, it's a two-part tip. The first part is listen well. Listen well and be curious. When we treat evangelism like a presentation rather than a conversation, people
Mm,
notice, they feel that. I don't want anybody selling me something. If somebody comes to my door, like it doesn't matter if they're trying to disguise it or whatever. I can tell they don't care about me. I can tell they're peddling a product. And so get curious, ask good questions, and be a good listener first. Because everybody has a point of greatest gospel need. It's a point where their specific story and struggles and experiences is in most dire need of the gospel. And you don't know what that is until you hear somebody start to
mm.
speak. I had a conversation with my neighbor not too long ago, and I had no idea what his spiritual background was. But the more that I listened and the more that I asked questions, the more I learned. And so then the pro tip is then find that point of greatest gospel need. If somebody said, I like to do this. If somebody says lonely in a conversation with me, that's a huge part of my story. It's what drew me to Christ. And so if you say lonely, I'm coming in because I have the antidote for loneliness. You know, some people have the antidote for anxiety because we have the hope of the gospel. And so all we got to do is listen and know what Christ did in your life. And where those stories overlap, you can say, hey, can I tell you a little bit about my experience? Right? Can I tell you a little bit about what God did in my life? That way, I'm not coming at you and saying, you need to believe this. I'm actually presenting you with something beautiful. This is what Christ did for me. He can do the same thing for you. You said you're struggling with loneliness or anxiety. I was too, and now I'm not, and this is why. And so it's not as quick and snappy as we might like, but listen well, get curious, ask questions, and then find connecting points and point people back to Christ.
And it's not a sales presentation.
It's not.
Take the pressure off. It's just a conversation with someone that you can ask the Lord to help you love them, and it'll just flow from that. It's not a sales presentation. And then you make a point, a very clear point in all of your yeah, in your writing, in your discussions about everyday evangelism. It's not an event. It's event versus overflow. It's not an event. Don't treat it as an event. Simply treat it as an overflow. Explain. Can you explain and unpack that for us?
Yeah, that's a mindset. It's a mindset. If I see evangelism, listen, if I hear the Great Commission, go make disciples, baptize,
Mhm.
teach. If I see that, go into all the world, and I think, okay, I was told to go from point A, I'm in Jacksonville, Florida, go from point A to Papua New Guinea. And once I get there, I start sharing the gospel. And then I come home and I plan my next trip. That's a point A to point B event driven evangelism. That is, I'm going downtown and I'm going to do this thing. Okay. What that does is it gives us an out in the rest of our life, in my everyday. So when I come home and I'm around my kids, I'm not really thinking, how am I pouring into them? How am I pointing them to the gospel? Because it's an event. I just did the evangelism. And now it's my off time. And you know what? I'm planning on going and doing another evangelism over here or missions over here. But I like to think of this in an Acts 1:8, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria. This is a very clear, as you go, be making disciples. It's not what Jesus said, but it's the intention of those words. As you go, be making disciples along the way. And so when we are full and when we've experienced the goodness of God, we should be overflowing into other people. It's D.T. Niles, the theologian, who says evangelism is just one hungry man telling another hungry man where to find food. And I've experienced this for myself. I have filled up myself. I should be looking for opportunities to overflow and tell others who are looking as well. And so we say evangelism is not that we can do evangelistic events. We go on mission trips. It's incredibly important. But I like to say this. If I'm going from Jacksonville to Papua New Guinea, I might take a taxi or take an Uber to the airport so I don't have to leave my car in the expensive parking lot. Well, already I have an opportunity to impact somebody, my Uber driver. And then I get on an airplane. When I start, my boarding and everything like that, TSA and the flight attendants and the boarding and all the people that I sit next to and the person I'm sitting next to on the plane, the people that I'm in the airport in Papua New Guinea, every single person is an opportunity for me to overflow because I'm in proximity with them rather than just seeing the final event. It's everything along the way as well. So that's just a mindset shift that we've got to have.
You're absolutely right. It is a mindset, and it's not just here or there that we quote unquote do evangelism. It's a lifestyle comprised of little things sometimes that lead to that trigger moment where we can share the gospel. Viewers, if you're interested at all in what Andrew had to say, and I am sure that your interest has peaked because you are thinking the same things that Andrew's been thinking and grappling with in approaching evangelism, and myself and others. If you are interested, Andrew has written a book. It's called Always Going. He discusses eight facets of that overflow, everyday evangelism. Andrew, tell us how we can get your book, where we can get your book, and how we can be in contact with you.
Absolutely. The best place to get the book is alwaysgoing.org. That is a website full of resources and opportunities to partner with our ministry in a lot more ways than just the book. There's videos, sermons, blogs, things like that. So alwaysgoing.org is the best place to get the book. You can also get it on Amazon.com in Kindle or hardcover edition. You can follow us for daily encouragement on Instagram and Facebook at Always Going Ministry. And we keep in contact with a lot of believers that way as well.
Andrew, thank you very much, and looking forward to you encouraging many others to take up the joy of everyday evangelism.
Thanks, Carl. I appreciate it.